Hello everyone, welcome back to another painting tutorial video. In this video I'm going to show you how to paint Crypt Ghouls. Here is the list of colors which I am going to be using for this scheme. The miniatures are fully assembled and I undercoated them with Ionrack skin as a base color. So first I'm going to make a mix of Athonian Camoshade and Lahmian medium, 1:3 part ratio. And with a medium sized brush I start applying it on the models, making sure that the wash is covering the whole surface evenly. Once it's dry, I'm going back to use Ionrack skin and I give it a light dry brush on the miniatures. In this way, this faded camo green is more visible on the recesses of the models. Then I'm going to use Deepkin flesh and start layering the model's skin, making sure not to get any of the color in the recesses. The color is a layer, therefore while it is wet it is quite visible, but once it is dry it gives a nice smooth highlight onto the skin areas. Now that the skin is layered and can be seen all the features, I apply a thin coat of Reikland Fleshshade. I am not mixing the wash, but still I want to have it applied quite thin, so that the Ionrack skin and the Deepkin flesh can still be visible beneath the wash. Once it's dry, it gives a nice decaying skin look. After the wash is completely dry, I am going to use Rhinox hide as a base color for the body hair / fur, the wooden sticks that are pinned through their backs, and also the tip of each fingers as a claw. Now in some of the miniatures it is not certain which one is a scar or a hair, so I leave them out just for safety, and once it is certain then I will paint them. Now I am going to apply Nuln oil wash onto the Rhinox hide painted areas. I use a small layer brush for this, and I am trying to be as neat as possible where it is the meeting with the skin. There I apply a very gentle recess shade. After the wash is completely dry, I am going to use Zandri dust as a base color for all the bones that can be found on the miniatures, including the rope. Now I am going to use Mechanicus Standard Grey, and with a small layer brush I start base painting all the straps that can be found on the ghouls. And also let's not forget the stones that some of the models are holding. The next color is going to be Doombull brown, and I start base painting all the chains, the hooks and other metallic parts. I am trying to be as neat as possible where I have painted already the models, not to go over there. Following it with Leadbelcher, I use a small layer brush and start layering all the metallic parts. In this way I have a decent rusted old chains and hooks on the miniatures. Now I can apply a shade onto the areas which I base painted. For this I am using Agrax Earthshade, and I apply it onto the bones, the straps, the stones and also the metallic parts. Once the Agrax Earthshade is completely dry, I am going to use Morghast bone and start layering all the bones that can be found on the ghouls. And I use Screaming Skull as an edge highlight on the bones. I also base paint the teeth of the ghouls and the skull's teeth, and let's not forget also the lower jaws that can be found in some of their backs. Now I'm going to use Cadian Fleshtone to base paint the meat that one ghoul is tearing off from the bone. And also my bone collector, who is carrying with itself someone's remains. I base paint the skin and all the organs, muscles. Now I'm going to use Carroburg Crimson Wash. I apply it in all the recesses where they pin themselves with, for example, the bones, and where the bones have their sharper tips, I also cover that with the wash. I apply it randomly in some of their limbs and also do a recess wash on all the scars that can be found on them. I also add a little bit in their lower eye bags, and also I give a whole wash on the meats and inner organs. The main goal is to give a wet/dried look on the areas where you want to apply the blood effect. Here as well, in some of them are missing their eyes, so I apply it onto the eye sockets too. Once the Carroburg Crimson Wash is completely dry, I apply Druchii Violet, but only on the tearing meat and the inner organs of the carrying torso. Now I'm going to use Kislev Flesh and start highlighting all the scars and the limbs, which I decided to give it a wash with Carroburg Crimson. In this way it has a really nice blending with the decaying flesh as well. And I also highlight the torso's flesh and the eye socket where the flesh is still intact. And also let's not forget the lower eye socket. I do a very thin line of kislev flesh. Now I'm going to finish the decaying flesh. I am going to use Flayed On Flash and start edge highlighting all the sharpest features of the models. The main focus is going to be their eye bridge, the cheekbone, the nose and mouth. The next color is going to be Abaddon Black. I start base painting their eyes and also the tip of each body hair slash fur. Then I'm going to use Dawnstone. I start highlighting all the straps and I also apply just a small dot in the eyes as a pupil. I decided to go for black eyes as they are blinded by the curse and they just don't see what gruesome mess they leave around them. I also edge highlight all the sharpest features on the rocks. I am going to use kislev flesh as a base color on the poxes that are on their body. Then I apply a small amount of Reikland Fleshshade onto the kislev flesh areas. Once the wash is completely dry, I use Ushabti bone And with a small layer brush I just apply a dot onto the center part of each box. And I'm going to use Nurgle's Rot on the boxes as an infection or corruption to Chaos God Nurgle, with all that rotting flesh around them, which anyway they cannot see. After that I'm going to use Ardcoat and apply it onto their eyes, just to make it a nice shining effect onto their eyes. Now some of them dripping saliva from their mouth, so I decided to paint that with Nihiliakh Oxide. I apply it onto the dripping, then I clear my brush and gently moving from the drop upwards into their mouth to make a transition that is dripping beneath their teeth. Whilst the Nihiliakh Oxide is drying, I am using Steel Legion Drab, and I do an edge highlight and layer onto the stick area of the wood. Where the tip is, I am making fine lines just to make it look sharper. Now that the Nihiliakh Oxide is completely dry, I use Ulthuan Grey, and with a small layer brush I apply just a dot on each of the tip of the saliva. And covering the saliva with Ardcoat. Now comes the best part of this whole tutorial, using Blood for the Blood God. I use a small dry brush, and first I start dipping it on a piece of tissue or kitchen towel. Once I am aware that the paint is still going to be able to apply on the miniatures, I start adding it in some of the areas on the models by dipping it onto them. I apply it around their mouths, some random body areas that the blood splashed on them, on their bone weapons, and also on the areas where I gave the Carroburg Crimson wash on their limbs. Then I switch onto a small layer brush and I start applying it on the recesses, especially where they pin themselves with the sharp bones or the chains. At the bones I apply it onto the sharper parts, making it more realistic how it would look like. I also try to make a very thin line from their back, as the blood still flows down from these wounds where they pin themselves. After that I'm going to use Screaming Skull and just adding a touch on each of the tip of the teeth, as it still shines through of all that gory mess. Now I can move on to the base. First I am applying Armageddon dust on the whole surface of the base. Once that's dry, I am using Agrellan earth and I start applying it into some of the random areas where I want the cracks more visible. I am giving plenty of time to dry, and once it's dry, then I added some skulls for the skull throne, and I also added a bit of rocks pieces and base painted them with Mechanicus standard grey. Now I'm going to use Agrax Earthshade wash, and I start applying it on the whole surface of the base. Now this includes also the rock and also the skull. Once the wash is completely dry, I use Morghast bone, and with a small dry brush I start dry brushing all the bone pieces, which I also glued them, that are included with the ghouls, and also the skulls. And then I switch onto a small layer brush and start layering the skulls and also the bones. Now I'm going to use Karak stone, and with a small dry brush I start dry brushing the Agrellan earth and the Armageddon dust areas. Now I'm going to use Carroburg Crimson Wash and start applying it randomly onto the bases, but for instance the torso piece, just underneath it I give a nice big wash. I also add around the areas of the body parts, which are painted as well with Carroburg Crimson, to add that nice blood effect to it. I also apply it onto some of the bone parts just to make it more fresh and fleshy. Now I'm going to use once again Blood for the Blood God. I use a small layer brush and I start applying it onto the stones as it dripping down from it. I also apply it on the areas where I previously added the Carroburg Crimson Wash. I am trying to mimic some footsteps, as some of their feet are soaked with blood and leaving traces, or just a few little drops from their mouth. The whole idea for this base is that it is their lair and they are doing a massive feast in the caves. Then I apply onto some of the bases, Mortem Turf. I use super glue and make sure it stays there. And finishing the bases with Abaddon black, I base paint the rim of the bases. And here are the finished Crypt Ghouls ready for their next feast. I hope you find this video useful and helpful. If you enjoyed this tutorial video, subscribe to my channel, hit the like button to reach out more hobby painters, and if you want to be notified about future video tutorial contents, hit the bell button. A massive thank you for my Patreons who are also helping out by supporting the channel. Thank you so much for watching. See you all in the next one. Cheers.